Video, I'm going to use data from this website, which provides an API so we can retrieve data about SpaceX missions. I'm going to use data from this API and load it in my own website. I'm going to make a little website here about Elon Musk's Roadster. So if we look at the documentation for the SpaceX API, we can see that they provide a lot of information here, including information about the Roadster. If I follow this link here, you can see that using this link provides some JSON data here about the current status of the Roadster, things like the speed it's currently travelling and its distance from the planet Earth. So I want to use that data in my own website here. I've just got the basic boilerplate HTML here that we'd use for any website, and I've got some JavaScript script tags here, so I can write some JavaScript in here. And what I'm going to do is use something called fetch, and I can just fetch that URL, the one that returns the JSON data that we saw earlier. What I need to do is fetch is to say, so use this method.then. And I use then because fetch will return something called a promise. A promise is something to say that, well, we will return this JSON data, for example, once we've got it back from the server that we've made this request to. Of course, things over the internet can take a few seconds sometimes. So in then, I can pass in a function here that would take the response from fetch, or at least the promise, and from that, because the initial response would be a promise to return data rather than the actual data itself, I can say return response.json, which will wait for this promise to resolve and get that JSON data for me. And then I can use another then function to actually use that return value that I put there. So I use another function here in this then again. I can say data, so I'm passing in this response.json into data here, and I can console.log that data. So if I reload the website now, nothing will happen here, but here you might notice the JSON data has appeared in the console. This will probably look very small on the video, but we're retrieving data in the console about the current status of the Roadster, and this is data that I can use on my website. One of these here is a little sort of something with the key details and then some details there about the Roadster in the values. Perhaps that's something I will use first. To display that on my website, what I might do is in the body, if I put a little div, say div with the ID equals, let's say Roadster, we can just leave that empty. And so I want to display some data in that div, so I can just use standard JavaScript document dot get element by ID, and I just created that div Roadster, didn't I? And then I want to say inner HTML, so I'm going to sort of overwrite any HTML that's in there. There's nothing actually in there at all at the moment, and I can say inner HTML equals data. And remember, part of the JSON response was called, one of the keys was called details. So if I say details there, let's see if we can get that on the website. Yes, okay, I was worried because it took a few seconds, but there we are. So we're displaying now the details in the response about Elon Musk's Roadster. There are some other things in the response as well that I might like to use. For example, there is the Mars distance in miles. there is the Earth distance in miles as well, and there is somewhere here the speed in miles per hour. So perhaps we can add all that. And so to avoid this part of our code getting really long here, what I'm going to do is actually define a variable. Let's just call it d. D equals data.details. So we can use the variable d there. So that should just display the same as before. But let's say that I will pass to that, let's say a paragraph about the details. And let's say another paragraph with the so speed was one of them. I think that was just called speed. I could say the Earth distance in miles. So that was another of the keys in the JSON response. And I can do the same for, let's say, the Mars distance as well. Mars. And so let's just clarify what all of these are. So I could say here speed in mph. Let's just check that I've got that key right. Speed underscore mph is actually what we wanted here. So speed underscore mph. And this one is going to be distance from Earth. And this one will be distance from, to Mars. Okay, we're going to need a semicolon. And let's just see what that looks like now. There we are. So we've got the details, we've got the speed of the roadster, the distance from Earth, and the distance to Mars. So this is data that's actually being updated by SpaceX via the API every 10 minutes or so. So if I reloaded this in about 10 minutes, I think these details would hopefully change by then. Something else that's in this JSON response here that's quite sort of interesting, I suppose, is that they've got some links to some Flickr images as well. So the key for that is Flickr underscore images. Let's just add an image into this page so it looks a bit nicer. We can add that in at the end here. And so instead of a paragraph tag, of course, we'll have to use the image tag. We say image src for source equals, and then it needs a quotation mark. I've escaped the first one there because we want that to appear in the HTML. And it was called Flickr underscore images. Flickr underscore images should be data.flickr underscore images. And because that actually returns an array, I'm going to just say take the first image in the array there. And then we just need to close the tag, don't we? So let's close that tag like that. And then we can move up that semicolon, and hopefully this will show an image as well. There we go. Okay, so here's my little website about Elon Musk's Roadster, showing its current speed, its distance from Earth, its distance to Mars, and a picture there from Flickr using the SpaceX API.